seeking some sort of new free trade deal with the EU, but it crucially adds if we can't get that free trade deal within the 2-year timetable that we have to exit the EU, then she doesn't want those transitional arrangements to go on forever. She does want it to be time limited. And look, Alistair, I think we're probably guilty as journalists of overusing the word historic. This is an historic week as far as the EU is concerned. Last night we had MPs give Theresa May permission to start the divorce proceedings. We now know how she will go about it. And I think this is quite a remarkable week as far as the EU is concerned.
Chris, thank you. Well, joining me now from Westminster are Conservative MP Kwasi Kwarteng and Labour's Andy Slaughter. Kwasi, let me start with you. Chris Ship just saying this is an historic moment, but you end up with a Prime Minister whose hands are tied much more than she ever wanted. Is that why it was a bit of a rush job this morning?
I don't think so, that's the case at all. The Prime Minister last week in Lancaster House gave a very comprehensive, very substantial speech. I think it was 6,000 words. And that outlined, to my mind, very clearly what the priorities would be for a British government negotiating withdrawal from the EU. Now,
but for Keir Starmer to see it just minutes before David Davis got to his feet is at best a discourtesy.
Well, there are two things. There is the speech, which we all saw 10 days ago. And as people have suggested, the white paper isn't going to be that different from the actual speech. The speech was comprehensive. It set out all the principles which the government would follow, and it made sense for the white paper following from it to draw very substantially from the speech. Right. So he had 10 days to read the speech and make his reply.
You had 10 days and all of your Labour colleagues to read it. You're a passionate pro-European, but you voted last night to fire the starting pistol on Article 50. From what you've seen, is there something you can embrace?
I didn't vote to trigger Article 50 last night. This is a farcical situation where we get a document a couple of minutes before Parliament is supposed to scrutinise it. A speech is a speech. A white paper is supposed to be a detailed setting out of government policy. What this confirms is that Theresa May wants it all her own way. She wants from now on to decide not just whether we leave the EU, but on exactly what terms. And those are clearly going to be very, very harsh terms indeed.
Kwasi, amongst those terms, and you've made it clear in an article that you wrote a couple of months ago, it will mean a closer relationship with what is now a Trump America and a closer relationship with China. Are you totally happy with that?
Look, America is not defined by Donald Trump. They've had 45 presidents. We've been a historic ally.
He tweets and the Ford Motor Company changed their policy. He tweets and companies shut down factories.
Look, they are our biggest trading ally and have been our biggest trading partner as a country and have been for decades. This has got nothing to do with President Trump's tweets. It has to do with a historic strategic relationship between Britain and the United States. And we will continue to trade with them. We will continue to travel to America. We will continue to foster a very good relationship, which has stood us very well in the past.
Final word to you, Andy, if I may. As I said at the beginning, you are a passionate pro-European. You've gritted your teeth, as you said at the very beginning. A brave new world or a dangerous new world?
Just to repeat, I voted against the triggering of Article 50 yesterday, not just because my constituents and most of London doesn't want that, but because Theresa May has tied the hands of Parliament and the British people, and she's going down a disastrous path here. And the idea that she can get what she wants out of a protectionist Trump regime is just fantasy.
All right, Andy, and again, my apologies for getting that wrong on the way that you voted. I do beg your pardon. Kwasi Kwarteng and Andy Slaughter, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, the Bank of England sees a brighter future for the UK economy, having eaten humble pie over predicting gloom and doom in the wake of the Brexit vote. It now says the economy will grow, and grow even faster than it thought as recently as November. The total of what we make, spend and export will grow this year, not by 1.4%, but by 2%. Inflation will edge up to 2.8%, but that's about the same as the bank predicted back in November. But, and it's a gloomy but, it sees the growth in wages and earnings slowing down a little. Our business reporter Jonah Partridge has the details.
There's no stopping our nation's taste for shopping. Since the referendum, the great British consumer has defied expectations. We've kept on spending money, and that's helped the economy grow faster than many had predicted. This lunchtime, the Bank of England kept interest rates on hold and upgraded its outlook for the economy. The sharp downturn the bank and many other economists predicted would happen after the June vote hasn't come to pass.
This stronger projection doesn't mean the referendum is without consequence. Uncertainty over future arrangements is weighing on business investment, which has been flat since the end of 2015.
The bank now expects the economy to grow by 2% this year. That's significantly higher than the 1.4% growth it forecast back in November. But it thinks inflation will rise more quickly. It's currently 1.6%, but is expected to peak at 2.75% in the middle of next year. Consumer spending's helped us to shake off the Brexit vote, but the pound fell on June the 24th and it hasn't yet recovered. Inflation's rising and higher prices are on the way, which could put the brakes on our spending and on our economic growth. In Withensea, Simon and Alison Williams are worried what increased living costs will mean for them and their 3 children.
Does anybody guess what's for tea?
Money's been tight since Simon lost his job 2 years ago.
At the moment, we are struggling with the budget. We're just about managing it, aren't we? And make sure that the essentials are done, like the mortgage is paid and so on and so forth.
They've also noticed they're now paying more for petrol. But there may be some hope. The boss of Shell, one of the world's biggest oil companies, told ITV News the oil price could slide lower again.
We set our oil price assumptions conservatively. Our oil price assumptions for this year are lower than what the current oil price is.
Britain was the fastest growing economy in the G7 last year. But the Brexit process is only just beginning, and there may be bumps along the way. Joanna Partridge, ITV News.
And our business editor, Joel Hills, is live in central London for us. Joel, people there telling Joanna that they're still just about making ends meet. What should they and you read into these numbers?
Well, they will know already, Alistair, that since the referendum, the British economy has actually grown more strongly than it did in the 6 months leading up to it. And today the bank is saying, well, the year ahead, the prospects look much rosier than they did. And there are reasons for this. The bank credits its own action and that of the government, in part for what's happened. It credits also the global picture, which is looking a little brighter. And it's saying, importantly, that it completely misjudged how consumers were going to react to all the uncertainty that we currently face as Britain negotiates divorce. It's going to happen from the European Union, but Brexit is a process. It was not an event, and as Mark Carney says, this is the beginning still of a journey. The point about prices is an important one. Inflation will rise. The Bank of England thinks that will squeeze household incomes, households which are already running down savings and already borrowing away, that the bank is keeping a very close eye on. He was asked, do you think interest rates are more likely to go up or down next? He replied, they could go either way. There you are. Much uncertainty still to resolve.
Joel, thank you. Now, it's the biggest IT rollout in UK history as the government aims to fit smart meters into all of our homes. The new devices measure energy use minute by minute. But an ITV investigations discovered evidence of confusing claims and spiralling costs. Our consumer editor, Chris Choi, joins me live in the studio. Those devices, are supposed to be free. You have discovered hidden costs.
Absolutely. First of all, how do they work? Now, these beam your energy use to the supplier and also to a handheld device like that you have in your home. The idea being, as you see how much you're using, you can change things and perhaps use an awful lot less, recouping the cost of the thing, which we'll come to in a second. The industry says that in the vast majority of cases, these take just one visit to install, but Kim Parkin in Sheffield, well, it took 4 for her.
I was fuming. The second engineer that came was told the reason I couldn't have the smart meters installed was because there was a fault of some sort, update, software. And then he told me to give them a call back in the new year to rebook, to do it all again.
You mentioned costs, and I guess the knock-on effect to people's bills.
Absolutely. Just take a look at our main findings here on the graphic. The smart meter rollout will cost a staggering at least £11 billion. Now, it will add an average of £350 per household bill, spread over time, no upfront cost, according to our calculations. Analysis for the ITV Tonight programme suggests that that figure could actually rise by a further £1.1 billion due to repeat engineer visits like the one we just heard about. And yet our survey shows 82% of people with smart meters think they are totally free. Now, SSE, the energy company, in common with a lot of others, is using this word free. I spoke to their head of retail.
The reality is, whether you take a smart meter or not, that cost is going to go across your bill, because as a nation, the cost of smart metering is going across bills. Now,
so you think it's fair to say free, do you?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I think that's interesting. I don't think it's fair to mislead customers at all.
Well, will you think about changing the wording then, where you're saying getting a smart meter with SSE is free?
Sure, I think I'm very happy to have a look at that.
Well, we invited the Energy Minister, but he declined our interview, but says that he believes that smart meters will save customers energy and money, and officials reject our calculation of that overspend.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. And indeed, you can see Chris's full investigation on energy bills. Can we be smarter? That's a Special Tonight programme at 7:30 on ITV. An award-winning human rights lawyer has been struck off the roll of solicitors after 12 charges of misconduct were proven against him. Phil Shiner made his name over a series of abuse cases brought against British Iraq War veterans. Geraint Vincent is outside the tribunal in central London. First, Geraint, the background to this case.
Well, Phil Shiner got up in a press conference in 2008, Alistair, and declared that he had evidence that British soldiers had unlawfully killed, tortured and ill-treated Iraqi civilians. Those claims led to an inquiry which lasted 5 years and cost more than £30 million, an inquiry which eventually concluded that those claims were entirely without foundation and entirely the product of deliberate lies. Now, this tribunal has heard that Phil Shiner, who I think we can see some pictures of now, used a middleman in Iraq to essentially round up complainants and persuade them to make these false allegations. The tribunal also heard a very powerful victim impact statement from the commander of the soldiers involved, Colonel James Coote. He said that I didn't think solicitors could make or endorse false statements. These allegations, he continued, resulted in an extremely stressful and demoralising decade for me and for other soldiers. Now, as for Phil Shiner, the man himself, well, he did not attend this tribunal. He said he was feeling unwell. The Solicitors Regulation Authority, meanwhile, has described Mr. Shiner as being in a state of avoidance. Alistair.
Geraint, thank you. Still to come, protecting puppies. New rules to stop illegal breeding on Britain's streets. But first, the Archbishop of Canterbury has been forced to respond to allegations of abuse in the Church of England at a holiday camp where he worked in the 1970s. Justin Welby has apologised on behalf of the church for not reporting John Smythe, who's accused of physically abusing teenagers and young men. Our reporter Nick Wallace joins us now from the Archbishop's residence of Lambeth Palace. Nick, these allegations were first reported in the early 80s. Why are we only now hearing about them?
Well, that's a very important question for all the people who have known about this for nearly 35 years. These claims are being made against John Smythe, a senior barrister who knew the Archbishop of Canterbury, the now Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, back in the late 70s. And Channel 4 News have contacted a number of alleged victims, young men who say they'd be befriended at this holiday camp by Mr. Smythe, taken back to his house, taken to his garden shed and then beaten savagely with a cane, sometimes hundreds of times. One victim describes being beaten so badly that they had to wear a nappy to staunch the blood. Now, Mr. Smythe allegedly said he was doing this to bring them closer to God. It was only after one young man attempted suicide that this report was written, and people still want to know why it hasn't been passed on to the police. Now, the Archbishop of Canterbury said that he knew nothing of Mr. Smythe's activities back in the late 70s, but that if he was guilty of assault, he should feel the full force of the law.
If he's committed criminal offences, then of course he should face prosecution. What else should he face?
And what would you say to the victims?
What I said yesterday, that it's terrible that they were treated like this, that they've been grievously and deeply let down. It's not their responsibility in any way at all.
Mr. Smythe has refused to comment on the allegations being made against him, but said that some of them are just nonsense.
Nick, thank you. President Trump has reportedly clashed with the Australian Prime Minister over a deal to resettle refugees in America. The Washington Post claims that Mr. Trump abandoned a phone call with the leader, describing it as, and I quote, the worst ever. Commenting overnight, Malcolm Turnbull said it was a candid and frank discussion, and the agreement still stands. And Prince Harry has revealed he's still haunted by his experiences of the Afghan war during a tour of the London ambulance service today. He said it's important to unburden the mind of any unnecessary baggage. He encouraged emergency crews to do the same. It is part of his campaign to highlight mental illness. Finally, this lunchtime, owning a dog is a joy shared by millions of Britons. But when choosing a puppy, how sure can we be that it hasn't been illegally bred in squalid conditions? Puppy farming is a big business, but today the government announced a crackdown on the illegal backstreet breeders. Suzanne Verdi has this report.
Sick and dying, these puppies were bred purely to make money for unscrupulous breeders. The buyers never got to see this. They were duped into thinking the pups were well cared for. It's this callous yet lucrative trade that animal charities and the government want to stop.
A lot of the puppies are obviously being bred in very dark, cramped, dirty conditions where they get very little contact with people, very little contact with anything that's going on in the world, and it's just a horrible location really for the animals to first come into the world and be brought up.
Under the new laws, it'll be illegal to sell puppies younger than 8 weeks old. Anyone breeding and selling 3 or more litters of puppies a year will have to apply for a formal licence. And those who sell puppies on the internet will now be subject to the same licensing rules. Breeders who break the rules will face an unlimited fine and up to 6 months in jail.
This is a warning to the unscrupulous and the irresponsible, which is sadly in this sector, that they really have got to raise the standard or they shouldn't be breeding animals.
While some say these new proposals don't go far enough, everyone agrees that all animals deserve a happy and healthy start to life. Suzanne Verdi, ITV News.
We'll have more at 6:30 and 10. Until then, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.